I'd like to take a couple of minutes of your time to talk to you about creating the agenda for the performance meeting. Now, in concept, this should be straightforward, except in reality, you need to adjust the agenda around your organization's culture, the availability of data, the personnel, and so forth. So what I'd like to do is establish with you some criteria or framework to consider. Now, we're going to be focusing in on this final meeting that we've talked about over here, the overall performance meeting. And there's a bunch of steps that you need to do to get there that will help you determine what this meeting should look like. The first thing to consider is the objectives for the performance meeting. And I think there's three core things that you need to make sure the meeting accomplishes. One is it has to end up delivering to you alignment across the leadership team around what the current performance is. Many times organizations have different views about the performance based on what department you're in. So ultimately, we need to walk out of this meeting not only with a one shared view of what performance looks like, but also an understanding of what needs to be done, who's going to do it, and when it needs to be done by. Secondly, we need to make sure that this is a tool that helps leadership select areas where they need further attention. In other words, for many organizations, this meeting on the scorecard is the first meeting that happens on a monthly basis, and it sets the agenda for the more detailed operations meeting, which may happen subsequent to this. That way, our operations meeting time is spent more efficiently on the areas that have the highest strategic payback. And then finally, we need to establish the platform against which we'll use to communicate performance to the wider organization. What elements of the performance can we share and how should they be told? Now, inside the meeting itself, there really are three levels of the conversation. First, there needs to be something that is, I'm going to call it systemic. Typically, the leader is going to take about 10 or 15 minutes and tell the story of the overall organization performance based on the strategy model and the indicators. Subsequent to that, we need to become specific. Our suggestion is about 5 minutes for each of these strategic objectives. No new information is going to be presented. It's a bit like reading the newspaper. You should have that read before you get into the debate about the content in this meeting. So typically we want the scorecard reports to be available to the leadership team 1 or 2 days before the meeting. And we're just going to focus on the what and so what, now what part of the conversation and analysis to make sure that we're aligned. And significant. We need to make sure that we have focused on a few strategic objectives that require more attention. So we go from systemic to specific to significant. And the significant ones are ones where we have a detailed walkthrough of their performance, the analysis, and recommendations. In this case, perhaps some new data is provided, but it's going to be provided in that standard dashboard format that we've already agreed to. So an agenda might look like this. 15 minutes on the overall performance, that systemic view, is going to be led, that part of the conversation is by the area leader, will lead that. And the outcome is, of course, the agreement on the overall performance. Then we'll move on to 5 minutes per strategic objective for those that we're not doing the detailed review on. And in particular, we're going to be taking a look at the now what, the specific recommendations. The reporters will be presenting that, and we'll end up with a level of agreement about the commitment and action items around those strategic objectives. Then we'll spend 30 minutes, I'm saying, on each of the strategic objectives that were previously identified requiring a more detailed review. During that conversation, there'll be a walkthrough of the performance issues and recommended actions. This is the few significant things to focus on. And this is going to be presented not only by the reporter, but in this case, the sponsor. Remember, the sponsor is the person that's going to provide what I call air cover, the resources and support to make sure that these processes and projects are successful. And again, we'll have a level of agreement about those higher item commitment items. Then finally at the end, there's sort of a 10-minute in total conversation led by the leader where we'll review the agreed to action items, responsibilities, and due dates so that everyone is clear as they leave the meeting what needs to get done before the next meeting. So again, some important points are we need to make sure that the scorecard is published maybe as much as 3 days before the performance meeting, so everyone has the chance to read it, understand it. Different people are going to do different things. For example, the area leaders are going to conduct more detailed functional or strategic objective-based reviews of the performance in preparation for the meeting. The leader is going to decide which strategic objectives need to have that more specific review and inform those so that the sponsor and the reporter can get ready, all in aid of their performance meeting. So that's the general framework. Now, what's interesting that we've observed is in some organizations, they've actually chosen to run the first 3-6 months worth of performance meetings with no data. What they've decided is if we get the data off the table, that's going to force us to have a conversation about the what, so what, now what, and move beyond a debate about the quality of the indicator. It also gives us 6 months to get our houses in order before we begin opening the kimono and sharing detail about how we're performing. Now, you might not want to do this, but understand the principle behind it is quite interesting. And that is, it's the conversation that's more important than the specific data. And what we're trying to do is inform and improve the skill set and business acumen of the leadership team to have these strategic conversations.